Thank you. Well, first, just to say I'm very happy to be mentioned in the same breath as Sadat Hasan Manto, who is a writer that I admire enormously and who's been so well translated recently into English by Atish, some of his selection of his stories. I've always revered the work of Manto and learned a lot from it. I have to thank India Today because they've given me this opportunity. The last opportunity having fallen away, and it was very much at their behest. I was called up and it was suggested that we needed to put that matter right and that this would be a way of doing it, and I was really happy and grateful to be given the platform. So thank you very much to everyone involved at the magazine. And so, well, here I am. 2 months ago on Indian television I promised that I would be here, and here I am, and you will have noticed the lack of protest or even interest from the people who were supposed to take an interest and protest. Even after various generous members of the press called them up and asked them why they were not protesting or interested. In spite of that, they did not protest and they seemed not to be interested. So that's good. Well, most of them, except for Imran Khan. And various politicians who appear suddenly to have discovered that their schedules were really crowded. I have to thank Imran Khan, actually, for this platform, because I was going to speak at another session less important than this one. And this was going to be his chance to talk to you, and I've, I guess, been promoted. So I thank him for vacating this spot and allowing me to occupy it. You know, there was a time when I would have felt very uneasy indeed to face Imran Khan on the cricket pitch. I was never a very good player of fast bowling or slow bowling or any speed of bowling in between. But times change, and now it seems that it is Imran who is afraid of facing my bouncers. Maybe his hook shot is no longer what it was. I want to make a number of points about this. One is, first of all, that Imran has not been entirely straightforward about the reasons why he did not come. One of the things he said was that he only found out a couple of days ago when the full program was issued and my name was on it. At that point he realized he could not come. This is not the case. Imran was told, I am informed, on February the 28th by India Today who the leading speakers at this conclave would be, and one of those was me, and he made no negative response. He was then told again 4 days later the list of speakers, including my name, and he made no negative response. So it is not true to say that he was not told until the day before the conclave that I was coming. So let's be fair. Imran is a man of the old school. Maybe he doesn't understand how this newfangled stuff called email works. Maybe he doesn't know how to open his email box and see what messages there are there. Maybe he doesn't even have anyone else to read it for him. Poor man. But this man wants to be the ruler of Pakistan. Maybe familiarizing himself with these newfangled technologies would be a good step on that road. Also, as Machiavelli could have informed him, if you want to lie, to placate the mullahs you depend on, don't leave a paper trail that proves you're lying. That's just careless. So seriously, Imran said, or his spokesperson said on his behalf, that he wouldn't dream of being seen with me because of what he called the immeasurable hurt that I have caused to Muslims. I'd like to look at that phrase, immeasurable hurt, in the context of the real world. In the real world, I would say, immeasurable hurt is caused to the way in which Muslims are seen by the terrorists based in Pakistan who act in the name of Islam, including those who attacked this country from Pakistan, backed by the Lashkar-e-Toiba, with whom Imran Khan now wants India to sit down and talk. Immeasurable hurt is caused to Islam by the presence in Pakistan for so long of Osama bin Laden, and by the opinion polls now, which show that 80% of Pakistanis, 80% of Pakistanis see Osama bin Laden as a hero and a martyr for Islam. And by recent evidence provided by WikiLeaks from the emails hacked from the security firm Stratfor, which shows that the Pakistan Army and officers of the ISI were in regular contact with Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. Immeasurable hurt is caused to Islam by people like the fanatic who killed this young man's father, and by those who showered the killer with flower petals when he came to court. Immeasurable hurt, Imran. This kind of hurt is measurable. In the real world, Muslims in both Pakistan and India suffer from enormous economic hardship, from bad education, a shortage of opportunities, from being one of the more backward communities in this country. And in Pakistan's dire economic condition, it's more or less a general condition. The repressive consequences of Islamic extremism on women and of mullah-driven politics on the freedoms of citizens, these things are what Muslims actually face in the real world. And Imran Khan would do well to speak of the immeasurable hurt caused by these things, and not take the demagogue's route of choosing instead to demonize a book written 25 years ago and to make its author a bogeyman with which to distract his audience from the immeasurable hurt of their actual lives. And what is true of Imran is also true of the seminarians of Deoband or any of the other people presenting themselves as spokesmen on Muslims' behalf, who seem more interested in highlighting these culture wars instead of looking at the realities of the lives of Muslims in the subcontinent. By the way, the Satanic Verses is a book which I would be willing to place a substantial bet that Imran Khan has not read. Back in the day when he was a playboy in London, the most common nickname for him in London circles was Im the Dim. The force of intellect which earned him that nickname is now placed at the service of his people. And its enemy, I believe, it seems, is my book. If Imran really wants to argue about the literary merits of the Satanic Verses, I am happy to meet him in a debate on that subject anywhere, anytime. Well, maybe not anywhere. That might be unwise. If he's not prepared to engage me, maybe he should pay attention to the rather difficult job he has set himself. Here he is, trying to play a very difficult game, placating the mullahs on the one hand, cozying up to the army on the other, while trying to present himself to the West as the modernizing face of Pakistan. That's difficult. I'd concentrate on that, Imran. Try and keep those balls in the air. It's not going to be easy. This is what we call the exercise of freedom of speech. Feels pretty good. just to move on to say this question of the idea of freedom, we've used this word all the time, and when we use it, it's a beautiful sounding word, isn't it? We say, who would be against freedom? You know, it's a word that you would be automatically for, one would think. You think about a free society as one, you know, in which 1,000 flowers bloom, in which 1,001 voices speak. And what a simple and grand idea that seems. It's like that copper goddess standing in the harbor, enlightening the world. But in our time, many essential freedoms are in danger of defeat. And not only in totalitarian or authoritarian states. Here in India also, a combination of religious fanaticism, political opportunism, and I have to say, public apathy is damaging that freedom upon which all other freedoms depend, which is the freedom of expression. I have to apologize for being one of the subjects of this argument. It is ideally a writer should not be the subject. The writer should be the observer, not the observed. The writer should be the person discussing, not the person being discussed. But circumstances once again dragged me onto this stage recently, or rather in Jaipur anyway, prevented me from taking it. And here you see it, I mean, that as we now have a couple of months of perspective, it's pretty clear to see that what happened there was not unpredictable Deobandi bigotry pandered to by, as it turns out, pretty useless electoral calculations by the Congress party. Didn't even work, Rahul. Didn't even work. Years and years of kneeling down in front of every mullah you could find, and it did not even work. Must feel sick. This was the debacle. This was what led to the debacle of Jaipur, in which somehow it was suggested that for me to turn up was wrong. This, it seems to me, is the world turned upside down. This, it seems here, what's happening here is what I would call normal. A writer of Indian birth who loves this country, who spent much of his life writing about it, shows up to talk to an Indian audience about India. I would call that normal. What is abnormal is for that to be prevented. And we seem to have been in danger of getting this stuff upside down. And I think it's important to see that that danger exists, and it is not diminishing, it is growing, and it's by no means only about me. I was extremely shocked at Jaipur when writers who stood up for my work were not defended by the Literary Festival and remain at this point still in danger of prosecution for what they did. This in spite of the fact that people have read from the Satanic Verses many times in India since the book came out in 1988 without any question of prosecuting them. And despite the fact that the only prohibition for the Satanic Verses is a customs ban, typically Indian piece of sleight of hand. Don't ban the book, just stop it coming into the country. You know, in theory, somebody could print the novel in this country, there's no law against it. Any publishers interested could see me later. You can download the book. The ban is an absurdity in the electronic age. And yet it exists, and there are 4 writers who may be in danger of prosecution for having read aloud from it. Jaipur itself is just an incident, but it's important as an indicator of what's becoming more and more commonplace in India, which is a culture war, a war against cultural artifacts of all kinds, films, works of art, visual art, literature, all different kinds, theatre, and this is carried out while the general public mostly sits by indifferently. Let's look at one of the major motivations of this new intolerance, which is this new censorship, which is the subject of religious intolerance. At the time of the European Enlightenment in the 18th century, the great writers and intellectuals of that movement Rousseau, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot, knew that their real enemy was not the state, but the church. Earlier, when the mighty Rabelais was under fire from the church, it was the King of France who defended him on the grounds of his genius. What an age that must have been, in which a writer could be defended because of his talent. Now, after Rabelais, the 18th century writers of the Enlightenment insisted that no church, even a church with an inquisition at its disposal, could be allowed to place limiting points on thought. The so-called crimes of blasphemy and heresy were their targets, because those were the crimes used by the church to limit discussion. And the modern idea of free speech was arrived at by defeating the notion that these were offenses and that these could be used as ways of silencing expression. Now, there's a tendency to say, that's a Western idea, that's not how we think over here. And I just wanted to mention something I've said before in other contexts, that the Indian tradition also includes, from its very earliest times, very powerful defenses of free expression. When Deepa Mehta and I were working on the film of Midnight's Children, one of the things we discussed often was a text which is very dear to her heart and is also to mine, which is the Natya Shastra. Now, in the Natya Shastra, we see the gods asking for theatre. The gods are a little bit bored in heaven, not that much to do. They decided they wanted entertainment, and so a play was made, and the play that was made was, as you perhaps know, was about the war between Indra and the Asharas, in which Indra, using his mighty weapons, defeats the demons. Well, when the play is performed to the gods, the demons are offended by their portrayal. The demons feel that this insults and offends them as demons. Their demonness is improperly criticized. And they attack the actors. Whereupon Indra and Brahma come to the actors' defense, and gods are positioned at all four corners of the stage. And it is Indra who says that from now on, that stage will be a space where everything can be said and nothing can be stopped. So this is one of the most ancient of Indian texts, the Natya Shastra, which contains as explicit and extreme a defense of freedom of expression as you will find anywhere in the world. This is not alien to India. This is not alien to India. This is our culture, our history, and our tradition, which we are in danger of forgetting. And we should do well to remember it. There was an article I just read just now in this week's Hindu newspaper, which reminds us of Radhakrishnan. S. Radhakrishnan would talk about how many of the earliest texts of Hinduism, many of the oldest texts, do not contain the idea of the existence of God. And contemporaries of the Buddha, quoted also in this article, would say there is no other world than this one, and would deny the idea of a divine sphere. So again, in the oldest parts of Indian culture, there is an atheistic tradition in which the ideas of blasphemy and heresy have no meaning, because there is no divinity to blaspheme or be a heretic against. This again, this is our culture. This is not an imported culture. It's not alien to the Indian tradition. This is the Indian tradition. And those who say it is not, they are the ones who deform that tradition. Now, if you feel, as some of these ancient sages thought, and as certainly I think, that God is an idea that men invented to explain things they did not understand, or to encapsulate wisdoms that they wanted to capture, that gods, in fact, are fictions, that gives you a kind of strange image of what happens when the fans of one fiction decide to attack another fiction. It's as if the revolutionary followers of Arundhati Roy were to take up cudgels against the old school charms of Nirad Chaudhry and declare him to be improper in some way. fictions should not go to war. There's room on the bookshelves for all of them. Chaudhry and Roy, anyway, they're alphabetically quite far apart. I also remember, let's not go back to ancient times. I remember within my living memory an India in which my parents' generation, very, very knowledgeable about the culture of Islam and Hinduism and so on, would nevertheless be able to sit around of an evening and tell jokes and be satirical and poke fun and debunk certain aspects of the religion, and there was no sense that something shocking or improper was being done. This was just part of normal everyday conversation. And I, as a young person, a young child and a boy growing up, heard in both India and Pakistan, because my family was more or less equally divided between India and Pakistan. In both India and Pakistan, I heard, in gardens in the evening, people sitting around having fun with the ideas of their culture and of their religion. And this was not considered to be wrong. The idea that this is somehow a wrongness has crept in much more recently and does great disservice to all of us. What has happened, the weapons used now to impose this idea of wrongness. Of course, the old weapons of blasphemy and heresy are there. But there are two new weapons, which are the ideas of respect and offense. Now, when I use the word respect, it means that I take people seriously. I engage with them seriously. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything they say. What is happening now is that the term respect is being used as a way of demanding assent. If you disagree with me, you are disrespecting me. And I will get very angry and may even pick up a violent weapon, because that's my way when I'm disrespected. The other word, offense, again, a culture of offendedness is growing up, not just in this country, elsewhere too, but very much in this country, where your offendedness defines you. I mean, who are you if you're not offended? Who are you if nothing offends you? You're probably a liberal. And who would want to be that? The fact is that in any open society, people constantly say things that other people don't like. It's completely normal that that should happen. And in any confident, free society, you just shrug it off and you proceed. There's no way of creating a free society in which nobody ever says things that other people don't like. I mean, if offendedness is the point at which you have to limit thought, then nothing can be said. There might be people who are offended by various kinds of literature. I myself am not very fond of, let me not mention Chetan Bhagat. I wasn't going to do that, so I have not. And yet I believe that such writers have the right to publish. And of course to live as well. Now, the point is that behind these ideas of offendedness and respect is always the threat of violence. Always the threat is, if you do that which disrespects or offends me, I will be violent towards you. And so the real subject is not religion, it's violence, and how do we face up to the threat of violence? And that's something that we need to think about. Recently, religious oppression has been aimed in this country at many of the arts. We know some of the big headline cases. We know about the Hindu mobs who destroyed the set of Deepa Mehta's film Water, which was delayed, the production of which was delayed for many years. It eventually took place in Sri Lanka. We know, as Arun Puri mentioned, and as I said 2 years ago when I was speaking from this platform, the shameful treatment of Hussain Saab, an artist who should have been revered by this country, who was instead driven out of it. We know the craven behavior of Bombay University when some little Sena apparatchik decided to dislike Rohinton Mistri's novel, and the book was immediately removed from the syllabus. We know the dreadful behavior of the university here in Delhi, which withdrew the classic essay of Ramanujan, the 300 Ramayans, because a few Hindu hooligans decided that it was anti-Ram. We see these things happening every day. Every day. We see gay artists in galleries in India being attacked by Hindu hooligan mobs. And these are the cases which make the headlines. You know, behind all of that, it seems as if almost every day now, somewhere, there is a piece of bullying by Muslims or Hindus of groups that they believe in some way offend them, and voices are being silenced. Voices are being silenced, publishers are more frightened to publish, galleries are more frightened to display certain kinds of art, certain kinds of film would not be made that might have been made 15, 20 years ago. The chilling effect of violence is very real, and it is growing in this country. It is growing in this country. And I have to say, this is where the other part of the story, which involves all of us, comes in, which is a public apathy towards this. You know, we approve of the great technological and industrial and economic growth of our country, but we don't seem to value our cultural artifacts in the same way, even though the greatest thing we know about Indian history is the incredible richness of the Indian artistic and cultural tradition. The contemporary manifestations of that seem to be neglected, and these ideas, the ideas that you should not upset people, you should not upset religious interest groups, these have quite broad acceptance in the public mind. So who gives you the right to upset people? I would say, who gives people who are upset the right to come and attack me? The question is not disagreement, the question is the violent implementation of disagreement and the threat of it, which prevents dissenting voices from speaking. That's what's going on, and people here are asleep, I think, very largely asleep to what's going on, and you need to wake up. You need to wake up. There's a line in my novel, Shalimar the Clown, in which one character says to another, "Freedom is not a tea party, India. Freedom is a war. You keep the freedoms that you fight for, you lose the freedoms that you neglect. Freedom is not absolute, it's something which somebody is always trying to take away from you. And if you don't defend it, you will lose it. You will lose it." And that's where we come, you know, to this pretty disgraceful vote bank politics that's going on in this country at the moment. We don't need to rehearse again the false analysis of the UP situation which led the Congress party down this particular road and to no avail. We don't need to give Imran Khan any more publicity, which he probably needs. It may be, I have this theory, it's similar to what Arun Puri was saying, that the Indian people, the Indian electorate, is smarter than these politicians and sees through them. Yes, people can be whipped up. People can be whipped up as they were by religious extremists at Jaipur. But how many people? How big are these mobs? How representative are the mobs? It's to me then now.
Because, as I said, they actually have real concerns in real life, which is what occupy their daily thoughts. You know, how to get an education for their children, how to have a good home to live in, how to get a job. These are the things that concern people in this country, not these absurdly demonized attacks on this or that work of art. And as I said at the beginning, you notice that when nobody is trying to whip this up, nothing happens. This is not, these objections to you know, whether it's my book or films or plays or paintings or whatever, these are not oppositions that come from the
bottom up. This is not some great groundswell of public objection to this kind of work. These are top down. These are people at the top who think they can get some benefit by whipping up and inflaming a situation, and who use their positions in order to do so. This is not actually how people think. This is from the top down, not the bottom up. People are more sensible than their leaders. India deserves to be led better than it's being led. It deserves leaders who can bring her back to the non-sectarian, non-communalist land which the nation's founders envisaged. And here at gatherings like this one is a place where I think the ideas of that India can be not so much forged as renewed, forged anew. And it can be done only if all of us have the ability to speak our minds, to speak freely without fear of religious or governmental reprisals. The human being, let's remember, is essentially a language animal. We are a creature which has always used language to express our most profound feelings, and we are nothing without our language. The attempt to silence our tongue is not just, it is censorship, but it's not only censorship. It's also, I think, an existential crime about the kind of species that we are. We are a species that requires to speak, and we must not be silenced. Language itself is liberty, and please do not let that battle be lost. Thank you.